This video is a demonstration of a few of my favourite Pilates moves, which are great for building glute strength, or the strength of your bum muscles. Glute strength is important just day to day for your posture, standing, when you're walking, especially when you're running or doing sports such as sprinting, football or rugby, or anything like that that needs a strong drive forward. Glute strength is also important for your back, so weak inhibited glutes are a contributor to lower back pain. They can also be a factor in flexibility. Weak glutes can contribute to tight hamstrings and tight hip flexors here in the front. And it's becoming more prevalent due to a more sedentary lifestyle, just sitting when you're driving to work, when you're working, and when you're home. So it's important that when you're trying to get up and about more often, and also when you're walking, taking quite long strides to get the movement through your hips as much as you can. This video was inspired by a couple of my clients, and especially two of my friends, and a little bit for me as well. Two of my friends were told by their physiotherapist that they, word for word, have a lazy arse. So their glutes weren't really firing and the lower back was being a little overactive. So if you do this video, send me a text and tell me how you got on. I'll be sending it to you anyway. Also, I believe that I had weak inhibited glutes due to the fact that when I used to go to the gym a lot, I used to go for anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week, and every time I went to the gym I would do 3 sets of 20 squats with the bar across my shoulder. And my bum was never sore. It was always my thighs getting sore, my thighs getting quite big and really bulky. And I tailored my program. Most of the leg work that I used to do was for glute strength and hamstring strength. And the backs of my legs, my glutes just didn't seem to respond at all. So from doing these, now when I do some weight work, I can finally start to feel my glutes getting a little bit tired the next day and a little bit achy fast. So if you do regularly attend the gym, I would recommend, and you don't really feel the same, I'd recommend this as a warm-up to get your glutes firing before you do your weights workout. So we'll start laying on your back on the mat. So as an optional extra, you can use bands to make this a little bit more intense. So I have a looped band. So it's just one continuous loop. This is, I think, the 3rd level up of intensity. So there's beginner, medium, intermediate, and then this is the next level. There's 2 more after this, so somewhere in the middle of intensity in the band. I also have just one of these long bands, so if you want to use one of these, just wrap them around the legs and tie it in a bow around your legs, and you can use one of these instead if this is what you have. You can also double these over and get a little bit more intensity in them. So, put the band on. So the band is going to activate the gluteus medius muscles of the glutes a little bit more. So there's 3 glute muscles. So the primary goal of this is to target your gluteus maximus, and also in some of them one of them specifically for gluteus medius and minimus, and also in some of them you'll get both together. So in this we're going to lay back, and it's above the knees for this, so just above the knees, just not at the side of the knee, on the lowest part of your thigh. So for position here, you want to ensure that you have the line from your hips through to the knees, through to your ankles, and out through the toes in a straight parallel line in relation to left and right side. So not with the feet out wide or with the feet all the way together. It can be tough to feel this, especially you want to make sure that you have the same stride in your feet. So what I usually do is just put my big toes together, my heels are a little bit apart, and separate them what feels like 1 to 2 inches. I'm going to have a little peek down to see that my knees are below my hips. Also in the foot position, we want to have the heels a little bit closer to your hips this way, as opposed to out here with the toes a little further away. The reason for this is that this longer foot position or foot placement engages your hamstrings in this exercise a little bit more, so to try and get more glutes, we have the feet in a little bit closer. It's also a modification in Pilates
if you find that your hamstrings constantly cramp in shoulder bridge, but hopefully after a few of these, your glutes will start to fire up a little bit more. So we're going to start with both legs. So curl your toes up to the ceiling. I'm going to drive through your heels. So feel firstly that your bum is connecting. So even if you have to use your fingertips to feel it, when you press your heels down, you want to feel that your bum engages and also that the pelvis doesn't roll back. So you want to feel that you're staying with a little curve in your back, lower back stays steady, and the feeling of pressing lifts your hips. So we press hips up and then coming back down. One thing to watch out for is that your ribs lift more than your hips, which sort of is that way. So it's a little bit more like yoga. So in this, we're going to try and stay in a straight line and get more extension movement in your hips. So extension is when the hips move backward, and flexion is when your hips fold forwards. So we're aiming for the hip joint, coxal joint, to get all of that hip extension when you're lifting, all of the extension movement when you're lifting, and not too much in the lower back. So feel that you're lifting hips up, ribs are staying down in the front and back. Another way to help create that is feeling that your knees are moving further down and away, and then they're coming back as you come back down. It's a little pivot on the heels, so the knees go forward and knees feel like they're coming back. So you're going to aim to start, this is just a little warm up, more so move with 10 of these, so I'm going to do just 3 more. Because I'm talking so much, I won't be great at counting. So when you're doing these yourself, do 10. The next move that we're going to do is the same, but you're going to do it with the right knee into the chest. So we're going to take the band off for this one. And it's just a little extra when you're doing the 2 legs, if you have them available. So I'm going to start with my left leg, as it's my weaker side. So you're going to take your right knee in toward your chest. So when you pull it down, try not to fully flatten out your lower back. So you want to feel that your knee comes away just enough that you feel it's at its end range in the joint and hip joint, and the lower back still has its curve. And then left toes are back up toward the ceiling. You feel like you're pressing and getting the glutes to connect. So we press the left knee forward as you lift, and then coming back. And if you find that you're a bit wobbly on this, your balance is a challenge, you can use one of the arms down on the floor for a little bit more. It's a little easier, say if your left leg is working with the right arm down, as the right leg would be what balances. The right arm takes a little bit of that support, or gives you some of that support. So we're going to do 5 more this side. So keeping the knee in can prevent the back from arching a lot on this exercise. So we're going to do 2 more. And we'll switch. So firstly, when you're switching over, just to stretch your left side after working, just pull it into the chest. It's also setting up for the right side. So we'll hold it in just for a moment, and then we'll start to press. So firstly, heel presses down, glutes connect, even if you have to check with fingertips. And then we're pressing up, knee goes forward, and then coming back. So in Pilates, in the pelvic curl and in shoulder bridge, it's often rolling up, but in this we're not doing the rolling up. It's just that you're trying to keep back neutral for Pilates terminology throughout the lift. So it's maximizing the joint movement from flexion, so you're staying in neutral, so you're more flexed to begin with, and then increasing the extension as you go up. It's just a different focus. If you do a lot of Pilates, it can be very hard not to do the undulation up. You do the pelvic tilt first, posterior tilt, and heel your spine off. So it takes a little bit of brain training sometimes just to switch that reaction off. But it's just for getting the glutes to work a little bit more. So this variation can also be quite good if your hamstrings tend to cramp when you're doing shoulder bridge. Mine used to cramp every time. I used to hate it and love it in equal measure. I knew it was strengthening the back of my legs, which were quite weak. It turns out my glutes were probably inactive. So we'll finish off with those there. So my left leg is much weaker than my right. So if I were doing this, I would do 10 on the left, 10 on the right, and I would go back and do 5 more on my left side, my weaker side. side to balance out. So our next exercise is face down. So we're going to go onto the elbows. Like so. So you're going to have elbows under your shoulders. Make sure this will fit in. Elbows under the shoulders, knees under the hips. And again on this, we're going to work on keeping the movement out of your lower back. So watching out for our arching and flexing, or extension in the lower back and flexion in the lower back. So feel that you're pretty centered in the middle, in neutral position in the spine. A little bit of engaging, bracing the abdominals helps here. So feel very softly that you're sort of keeping in mind the position of the front of the rib cage. You're not letting the front of the ribs drop down and extending in the upper back. You're keeping the back of the ribs open and keeping the lower abdomen slightly lifted and engaged. So we're going to start with the left leg. So slide the left leg back until your knee is straight, and also check that it is behind your hip rather than away out to the side. So we're going to lift up using your glutes. So you want to make sure that your knee is locked, it's so straight, rather than letting it remain soft, something like this. So it looks pretty straight, but we're going to get that full lock in the knee. So the reason for that is we want to get our quadricep muscles, the muscles on the front of your thigh, to contract fully. And this helps your hamstrings relax a little bit with reciprocal inhibition and get the glutes to fire out a little bit more. You can also add, I don't have any, but you can add an ankle weight to make this a little bit more intense. So I'll show you the back arching on this, which is something like that. So that's extension in the back, flexion in the back. Extension in the back and flexion in the back. And also because I'm going high, my hips are also turning out slightly, so there's a little exaggeration. So I'm going to try and keep everything parallel. So 10 on that side, and then we switch. So check your position when you're switching. And then leg slides out, knees locked, feels like you're lifting your kneecaps, and then we press up and back. Now this is my second round of doing these, and I can definitely feel that my glutes are firing that little bit more. I feel a little more tired. So the alignment that we have in this, in relation to the back staying steady and the open position here in the hips, is what we're going to take into the following exercise. So keep this in mind when we're laying on our side for the next one. Take our knee in. So for a little stretch, just press back like a child's pose, and then we're going to come out onto the side. So here you can use your arm to keep your head propped up. You can also use a pillow, whereas I'm here in the studio, I have a block for anyone who doesn't like to use the arm. So, another thing is if your shoulders are all tight, it tends to draw your ribs forward when the arm goes overhead. So if you're finding that overhead position is causing the back to arch from the ribcage position, then try and tuck it back first. Maybe it's just an adjustment you need to make, or use the block or pillow instead. Or sometimes you can just take your elbow forward and use your forearm. So in lower body position, we're going to have the bottom floor leg forward. So in this case, it's my left leg forward. I'm going to take the right leg up. So we want to try and have neutral spinal position, so feel that you're not arching your back. I don't know if with black you'll see the arch. Here I've let my lower back arch a lot, and my heel goes back a little bit further. So here my leg is at full extension in the hip. So if I correct, you can see that my leg comes a little bit forward again. So pelvis is just like the position I had face down, and I'm going to lift up and come back. And you want to try and fully extend your hip to try and switch off a little muscle here. There it is, right there in your hip. And this is the TFL, or tensor fasciae latae muscle. So once we inhibit that a little bit with extending the leg back, then we'll get more work through the gluteus medius. It can often dominate on this exercise. You can sometimes feel it there. And I find if sometimes you just roll a little bit more forward, you can feel that your glutes fire that little bit more back here. So if your hand is on your hip like this, We're aiming to feel more muscular activation under your thumb than under your fingertips. And we're also aiming to feel that the hip isn't sideways tilting, the pelvis isn't doing a rock like this. You can see the way my hand is moving up and down. You can also see the way that a little bit of space comes underneath my lower back and waist and then flattens out again. So this is my lower back moving. This is just flexing sideways, rather than my hip staying steady, or my pelvis staying steady, excuse me, and the hip joint gaining the movement. So when the hip joint gains the movement, the muscles of your hips do more work, whereas this is the waist working. So if you want that, you can add a little bit of both. But we want to, for this video, just try and work through the glutes this way. You'll probably burn out pretty quickly if you haven't done anything like this before. And then stretch, just take your knee all the way up and over. And then we'll switch sides. So I'm going to press up and switch.
So ideally I would have started on my left side. So keep going with the left side first.
So we check the position again, so feel that you have the heel pushed back, so the hip is extended. The front of the hip is open and including the little TFL muscle. So feel like you can hold on to your hip to feel everything is steady. And we drop down and lift. So a lot of the time you'll see clams in glute activation exercises. I have deliberately not chosen them here because the clam can target a muscle, also target a muscle called the piriformis, which is deep to the glutes. So you have to press down quite firmly if you want to feel that your thumb is pressing on it. And it is also going to fire in a clam. So if it's tight, the clam can tighten up further. So what I'm aiming to do with this is get the other muscles, so the gluteus maximus in the first two, and somewhat the gluteus medius, and this one in particular, the gluteus medius muscles, quite strong to sort of override the piriformis and encourage it to release, so the kind of thing, so I don't have to stabilize anymore, and it will restore its length and its suppleness then. And as I'm talking in these videos, my count tends to go out the window. You're aiming to do 10 each leg, and in the case of a weaker, more inhibited side, 10 on one side, 10 on the other, and 5 more on the weaker side. So I believe I've done about 10 now. I'll do an extra one just in case. And then taking the knee up. So I'm just adding this in. This is another movement which is also excellent for building up the strength of the gluteus medius muscle. It's the side bend. So I associate, or used to associate the side bend with just working the waist and the shoulder. But once you start to really focus on using the hip, you'll also feel and sense how much your hip is working in this exercise. So I'm going to do this with a hip-driven focus on this. So the first thing you want to ensure is that you have pretty good position for your shoulder, for shoulder stability, and that you're using your core as well. So we're going to try and get roughly a straight line from your shoulders through the line of the spine and down toward your knees. Mine are a little bit forward. So we want to have the elbow underneath your shoulder. So watch out for starting off like this and putting the elbow underneath. It'll end up a little bit higher when you push down. So elbow is underneath. You're pressing the elbow down into the floor and feeling all the muscles of stability in your shoulder engage. We're bracing slightly through the core and feeling that you're getting a slight lift underneath in the side waist. And we're going to lift up our hips. So we're going to focus on pressing the floor knee, we'll call it, down into the mat in order to drive you up. So press your knee down. I'll do this with the top leg out of the way. So you press down to lift up and feel that your hip is working, and then dropping down. So make sure, even though you're focusing on your hip here, that you're keeping your shoulder stability, so don't come down and lose the shoulder stability. So you keep your your elbow pressing down and using the hip to press your knee down. So I do this firstly on the knee. I find that it's just nice to really, really isolate and focus on using the side of your hip to lift up here. And then once you feel a little stronger, you can do it with a full straight leg. So we get a stronger, straighter position. You want to have your knee, again, pretty locked tight. This is just more for knee stability. And then when you're pressing up, we use the side of the hip and back down. And 3 more. It's tough today. class this morning and I'm filming a video. And then switching over. So we'll start again with the floor knee bend, so you can focus on the side of the hip. So feel that the elbow is underneath your shoulder. Sometimes when I place it here, it looks like it's slightly falling underneath the underarm. The elbow is driven down from the shoulder stability, so you can sort of feel when you press underneath that the muscles at the rear of the underarm are engaged. They're firm with engagement. The waist is slightly lifted, and you're pressing knee into the floor in order to lift the hips. And really focusing on the muscles of the side of the hips, pressing you up. And then we'll switch to the longer legged version. Toes are just about in. There we go. So again, make sure that your knee, your floor knee especially, is completely straight, so you feel like you're engaging the muscles around the kneecap. Elbow is still underneath, and shoulders pressed down, and then we lift up. And if you find that you have one hip stronger than the other, my left side is a little stronger in this section, I think it's mostly from my shoulder, you want to make sure that you do the equal amount of work on each side. So if you have a strong side, don't do the straight leg and then do the other side with the bent knee. Try and build up the same level in both hips. So you might, again, do bent knee on the weaker side, bent knee on the stronger side, even if you feel that it's not quite the same, and a further 5 on the weaker side again. So we'll come on up now. So that was the 4 exercise glute strengthening routine. If you have any questions on the exercises or anything related to this, please pop them down below in the comments box and I'll get back to you. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who shared my channel during the week. I don't know how many shares, but I gained 60 subscribers over the week. Thank you so much for helping me out. I made the 100 mark for the custom username, although when I went to select the new username, I found out that I already had one because my channel was verified. Thank you for sharing and helping me out, even though I found out that I already had the requirement. But I really appreciate it. So on this video, if you know anyone who has spoken about it, any trouble with their glutes or anything like that, please send it on to them. The next video I have planned is also inspired by some of my clients. So it's, I myself have a little bit of pelvic asymmetry in that one side of my pelvis is a little higher than the other and is rotated forward and contributes to some of that tightness that I feel. I have a very tight piriformis on one side, and that's also the left side that's weaker as well, so my glutes don't fire quite the same. So this is for some of my clients who've spoken about this. I can think of 7 clients just off the top of my head, so that will be for you. I also want to do an accompanying video for this on a stretching routine or a mobility routine to improve the extension within the hip joint. So that will be coming up next to accompany this video. All 3 will go hand in hand. The stretching routine in particular for this, but also the pelvic asymmetry can also create muscular imbalances, which can cause the glutes to slightly switch off. So they will all go hand in hand together, and they will be coming up next. So please subscribe to the channel and you'll see them pop up on your YouTube feed. I send my videos and my blog posts out in a newsletter, so if you want to see my newsletter, please subscribe down below. And thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.